Creating Mule applications with Anypoint Studio. Anypoint Studio is an Eclipse-based integration development environment, providing us two-way editing between graphical and XML views. It has a debugging toolkit that's visual, pre-built tooling to connect to many popular services like Salesforce, Workday, and Facebook, and also protocols like HTTP, HTTPS, and on. It also has connectivity for any SOAP or RESTful API. It includes a data transformation framework and language, one-click deployment of applications to servers, templates for common integration patterns, integration with Maven for continuous build processes. The anatomy of a flow, as seen through Studio, will show us flows with a message source at the beginning, in this example HTTP, message processors after that flow, such as a SOAP request, a transformation, and a logger, and optionally an error handling element, providing us exception capabilities. When flipping from the visual view to the XML view in Studio, we'll see that flow represented in this XML. Here you can also see at the beginning the message source defined as an HTTP listener, message processors such as web service consumer, the data weave transformer, and the logger. And you can also see the exception handling block at the very bottom, holding the set payload, set property, and logger. When touring Anypoint Studio, you'll come into contact with the Package Explorer on the left, defining the projects you have and the files within them. The canvas in the middle, allowing you to visually add elements in to build out your APIs or integration applications. The Mule palette on the right, giving you a list categorized full of different components that you can add to the canvas. And the console at the bottom, providing you output and details of what your server is currently doing and logging. Included in Anypoint Studio is an embedded Mule runtime, so you can test your applications without leaving Studio. The console output will give you application logs and details about the server. There are several ways for us to test applications. We can make HTTP requests with a browser, a curl-like command line utility, or a browser extension such as Postman, which is what we'll be using in these videos. While we'll be manually testing through a REST client, there are ways to do automated testing of Mule applications as well. You can use a tool called MUnit. MUnit is a Mule application testing framework for building automated tests. MUnit's fully integrated with Anypoint Studio and will allow you to create, design, and run MUnit tests, just like you would other Mule applications. If you're coming from a unit testing framework like JUnit, or if you've never written tests before, you'll find that MUnit is not too big of a hurdle to get over. MUnit provides a lot of the unit testing functionality you'd expect, like rich support for mocking inside of Mule applications. If you're interested in more about MUnit, it's covered in our Anypoint Platform Development Advanced course. Now let's get into walkthrough 3.1, where we'll create a Mule application with Anypoint Studio. We'll create a new Mule project with Anypoint Studio, add a connector to receive requests at an endpoint, set a message payload, run a Mule application using the embedded Mule runtime, and make an HTTP request to that endpoint using Postman. Let's get started. First, let's go ahead and launch Anypoint Studio on our machine. Once Anypoint Studio has launched, it may ask you where you want your workspace to live. This is where your projects are going to be stored locally on your computer. In my case, I'll keep it in my home folder under the folder called Workspace, but you can choose a different directory if you prefer. Let's hit OK. Once Anypoint Studio starts up, you may be prompted with some information about the newest updates. For now, we can skip this. You may also be asked if you want to give anonymous statistics to MuleSoft. You can choose your choice here. You may also get a pop-up at some point in the bottom right stating that there's updates for Studio. And if you do, you may just want to pause the video and run those updates to make sure you're on the newest version. In this case, I'm going to continue on. If you are at this start page where it's got a bunch of options on the left, let's go ahead and click the X in the top left. And now let's see if we can create a new project. To start off, we'll go to File, New, and choose New Mule Project. A screen will then pop up with some different options for our new project. Let's go ahead and name our project. In this case, we are going to call it AP Dev-American. Go ahead and choose the newest runtime option that you have in here. In my case, it's 3.8.0, and keep all other settings as is, and we'll click Finish. Great. Now that we've got a new project, let's see if we can set up a little HTTP server that listens in and allows requests to come in and provides a response back. Here we can see our canvas letting us know that we can drag elements from our palette on the right. Now in the palette, we've got a bunch of different sections that we can choose from. And to start off, we want to look inside of our connectors for an HTTP connector. So if I scroll down inside of here, I'll eventually find the HTTP connector and drag this right into the canvas. Once you drop your HTTP connector into the canvas, it's going to create an endpoint, and you can see it's been wrapped in a flow called apdev-American flow. Let's start off by setting up a connector configuration. This will define its behavior. We'll click the plus sign, and a box is going to pop up giving us some options. In this case, let's let our HTTP endpoint bind to all network interfaces and allow it to listen in on port 8081. You may want to make a mental note of 8081. When we run this project in a moment, if you do get bind exception issues, it could just mean your computer does not allow you to bind to this port, and you may need to change it later on. For now, we'll keep it as 8081 and hit OK. Now that we've chosen 8081, let's set up some more specific settings on this endpoint. For the path, let's listen in on the path flights, so that requests that come into flights on the get method, meaning we want to retrieve information about flights, they will be allowed in. Great. We've set up a basic HTTP endpoint. Let's go ahead and apply all changes in the top right. Once you've applied all changes, we can now see in our canvas we need a process item to go inside of here. In our case, we just want to provide some static response back to our client. Among connectors are scopes, are components, and transformers. In this case, let's open up the transformers section. Transformers give us a lot of different options of how we can alter the information moving through the flow. In my case, I want to set the payload. So let's locate set payload inside of here, and let's drag set payload into the process phase. With set payload inside of the process phase, you can see there's a value box in here that'll let us choose what we want to set the payload. Now you will see this expression notation in the value box by default. Ignore that for now. We're going to get into this a bit later if you're taking the full developer class. For now, I'm just going to put in flight info. And with the value flight info in place, let's go ahead and apply all changes once again. Now, we've got our elements inside of this flow, but there is also an XML view to these applications as we had mentioned. So now that we're in the message flow tab or the graphical elements, let's go to the configuration XML. If you look closely inside of the configuration XML, you can see there's actually an XML tag for each of the things we've added. In particular, you can see our starting off endpoint, which is the HTTP listener that we dragged in initially, listening in on flights with get. You can see above the flow the connector config we had set up. This is where we specified the port as 8081. And you can also see our set payload element inside of here as well, where we're going to set a value of flight info and respond back to the client. Developers can work in the XML, they can work inside of the message flow graphical interface. It's all just a convenience thing. Most developers will use both. For now, let's go back to the graphical interface by clicking on message flow. Inside of the message flow area, let's right click inside of the canvas, and let's go ahead and run this project. Now, once you've chosen to run the project, you'll see in the console towards the bottom of your screen a bunch of log messages coming up. This means our MMUULLEE server is starting. Our hope is once you run this project, you'll eventually see that the apdev-American application is deployed. Again, if you do get exceptions about bind errors, it may just mean that your HTTP endpoint can't be on 8081. So feel free to pause the video now and change that if necessary. But if your application did deploy successfully, let's see if we can open up Postman and make a call to this MMUULLEE application. Inside of Postman, let's go ahead and clear out any existing requests we might have and try to make a new request. In this case, we're going to call out to our MMUULLEE flow, which we know is on HTTP localhost 8081. Now recall that we listened in on the path of flights, so let's add /flights into our path. Note that in Postman we're doing a GET request, so this should be a valid request to our MMUULLEE flow. Let's click send. After hitting send, you should see a response come back saying that you have flight info. This is exactly what we designed our flow to do. Now we've got a working flow with a little HTTP server providing a static response back. We're going to build on this as class goes on. But before we go any further, let's be sure to shut down our MMUULLEE application. To do this, we'll enter back inside of Studio, right-click in the canvas, and stop the project. Now you'll see the red light go to gray inside of the console, and the application is no longer running.